But yes, and hopefully, this has given you some additional background and useful ideas. And again, just like somewhere in your subconscious and somewhere on the back processor, these are additional things for HGAPS and the wider psychological community to get involved in better describing.
Yep.
Because I mean, from your knowledge of how useful Sparkle can be for looking at databases, you can imagine. I mean, technically, Wikidata isn't a database; it's a knowledge base, which means that instead of storing something in a big table like an Excel spreadsheet, it stores it all as a big network. So you just have all of these items which get Q numbers, and they are linked to each other via these relationships which get P numbers. But you've basically got a ridiculous sized network where each node is a Q and each edge is a P. And so I think Wikidata currently has 88 million Qs, and those are linked together by well over 1 billion links. So you get really interesting links, which is in fact how I found out that I am academically descended from Bunsen, of Bunsen-Burner, because I made a Sparkle query that says, who was my PhD supervisor, who was their PhD supervisor, and who was their PhD supervisor, and have any of those people had anything named after them. And it turns out that yes, one of them does, and it was Bunsen, of Bunsen-Burner.
Remarkable.
Speaking of which, who was your PhD supervisor? Oh, wait a second, you're the other kind of doctor, aren't you? Never mind.
I'm sorry?
Do you have, I don't even know how other doctors work. Did you have a doctoral supervisor? Do things work like that in the non-PhD world?
Yes. Yeah, technically, I think I had 2.
Well, I'm just going to add those in now in that case. Let's go to you, and I'll add in Advisor. Who were they?
Carroll, Carroll, middle initial E.
Oh, interesting.
Last name Izard, Izard.
See if it's already in here. No, not with an E. Here we go, American psychologist.
Yep.
Didn't realize that their middle initial was E. So that's number 1. And the second one is?
Brian, Brian. Ackerman, Ackerman.
Did not find them. So they don't have a Wikidata item.
Well, you put in a middle initial.
Oh, yeah. What's the middle one?
P as in Peter.
Still didn't find them, brats. What was Carol's middle initial again? Oh, E.
Alice.
Yeah, it knows her. Yeah. Right, well, let's just also put them in as E Izard, as they are also sometimes known. Publish. Cool. And yeah, so eventually, if you happen to know their doctoral advisor, you can trace that back up again.
Sylvan Tompkins.
I'm just going to. Oh, you know who that was?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, a second. Advisor was, what was it?
Sylvan, Sylvan.
Yep.
Tompkins is Tom, no H, no P, just, yep.
Still didn't find them either. So it's usually good at finding people who have published before, because they may have been added through some source MD process, which I suspect is why you initially had an item. But it's easy enough to create a new one. So let's just go for Brian Ackerman. I'm just going to say create a new item. Create a new item for Brian Ackerman, also known as Brian P. Ackerman. They were or are a assume a psychologist.
Yes.
I'm going to create an item for them, and then I'll just do the absolute bare bones for them. Let's say that they were an instance of a human. I'm going to also make an assumption there. Instance of a human, occupation, psychologist. Do they have an official website somewhere or some other information about them on the internet?
Yes.
ORCID ID would be
They're still a
ideal.
professor at the University of Delaware.
Perfect.
Oh, he's emeritus now.
Oh. So they have an end date for that in some way.
His PhD was from SUNY at Stony Brook.
Here we go. This is their UDEL. Is this them, their UDEL page?
Yeah, that's him.
All
And
right.
some publications.
It's an official website. Let's get that up. Official website. Yep. Just add that so that it's usefully linked. They were employed by Delaware. Does it have an end date for them as to when they became emeritus? Doesn't state that here. That's a pity. They have a ResearchGate. They do have a ResearchGate. Not particularly well populated, but that's fine. I'll still include it. ResearchGate profile ID is Brian Ackerman. So you can see how I've just sort of started populating all of this. And I'll use their web page as the reference for these things. So I want to prove that they were employed there. I'm going to say reference URL is this. Yes, that's good. Occupation of psychologist, I'll also use the same thing as a reference. Reference URL. State this.
The occupation.
Yes, good.
You can list more than one.
Correct. For example, they are both a psychologist and a researcher.
Oh, Brian would be proud. You just warmed his heart.
I
was wondering about professor.
Oh yeah, is that yeah, why not? I'll stick it down as professor. Academic title. Now I don't know whether that is added as an occupation or as a
rank.
Title or as a role or something. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact way in which that's meant to be structured, but there'll be bots that go through and tidy this stuff up. Like if you put professor as an occupation and it should be a rank, there'll be some bot that goes through every instance of professor as an occupation and moves it to professor as academic title or whatever.
Wow.
So don't worry too much. It's better to have the information there and poorly structured than to not have it there at all, because it's easy to then add structure to it later. So yeah, like an ideal would be to then include, for example, their employer, edit, add qualifier, start time, end time, blah, 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 blah. Conceivably, subject has role might be the way to do it in terms of like if they used to be a lecturer and then they were not a lecturer and then they were a visiting professor and then whatever, like I suspect that that's probably the sensible way to encode that up. But yeah, so that's just an example of creating quickly formatting up a new item for a person so that now Brian Ackerman, if I go back to here, Youngstrom, we were trying to add Brian P. Ackerman. There was no item for them. Well, there is now. Brian Ackerman, publish. All right. So now we have your doctoral advisors both listed there. And in fact, when you went to University of Delaware, what was your academic degree at University of Delaware?
PhD.
Yep, so you did your PhD there. PhD, oh, I didn't realize you were a PhD. I always assume you are the other D. All right, and what other information does it suggest? Oh, well, academic major. Is psychology the sensible academic major to put, or is there something more specific?
The major was psychology. The specific area was clinical, but that's not a distinct degree.
Mm-hmm. Or you could, field of work, the specialization of a person or organization. Yes, that's the one.
Yep.
It already worked it out before I misspelled it. So there we go. We could do something like that. Publish. There we go. So it now knows a few things. Oh, didn't like that as a field of work, has some potential issues. Why? The property field of work should not be used in this location as a qualifier. It should only be used as a main value. All right, well, fine. We'll give it to you as your main field of work then. Main field of work, clinical psychology.
And what are the exclamation marks after Carol and Brian?
So what that's going to say is, I suspect if it says, if they are your doctoral advisor, they should have an item that says that you are their doctoral student. Yeah, here we go. Inverse constraint. Carol Izzard should have the inverse statement. Doctoral student is Eric Youngstrom. So we could then go and add the inverse statement. I actually am not a huge fan of the way that some items require that you need to have the inverse statement. Firstly, I think that it should be done automatically, which weirdly this one doesn't seem to yet be done. And secondly, it feels like it's the sort of thing that can easily start to get messy by some things having an inverse statement and some things not having an inverse statement.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just Shafee. So this, again, this is my example for myself, and there's various things that you can put in here. So I've got occupations, yep. My start times for when I started as being these different occupations. So I consider myself to have become a bioinformatician only later in life. I've been a biochemist for longer. Became a Wikimedian in 2013, became a data scientist in 2016. My employer, work location, position held, that's probably how we would do professor. Position held research fellow, position held researcher, position held research fellow, educated at different locations, doctoral thesis. So we now have a link to my actual thesis. Here are my PhD supervisors, affiliations, official website, described URL, VIAF IDs, ISNIs, Wildcats, Figshare, GitHub, LinkedIn, Mendeley, Orchid, Scopus, like also some of these things I've added, some things other people have added. There's much less of an issue with editing your own item in Wikidata because of the way that it's harder to do puffery and the way in which the data is stored in the structured format, ideally with references, although interestingly, I have not put references for most of my own stuff, which I should definitely do. So yeah, so that's kind of how these things end up being formatted up for people. And that's why when we talk about my Scholia item, going all the way back to looping back around to this, when Scholia knows that my co-author graph is this, it's because for my publications, it knows who I am and has linked all of these people to me through our publications. And it knows that my publications have these main items, and it then can go through and where's my academic family tree? Yep, here we go. So Thomas Shafee, my supervisors, Ralph and Florian, their supervisors, can't seem to trace back any further than this, but once we get through Anthony Kirby, Malcolm Clark, Alexander Todd is some famous chemist, and then it became really easy to trace them back. Ada Adolf von Bayer won a Nobel Prize, so their tree is really well described. And then we get back finally to, where's Bunsen? Bunsen is somewhere back
He was
there.
a little bit, yep.
Oh, yeah, here we go, Robert
just-
Bunsen.
Yep.
Yeah, but eventually we get back to people who look like this. I'm just going to open up their Wikidata item. So this is George Balthasar Metzger, a German physician in the 1600s. Not a great hairstyle he went for, but that's as far back as I've been able to trace my academic lineage. So they were 1600 and something, and who was the other wing of that? Friedrich Hoffmann. As soon as you hit chemists, it really quickly goes into Germans. Like all of the chemists seem to have German and Dutch chemists in their lineage. So when are you about? Friedrich was born in 1660. So there we go. So that's how Wikidata can start to build up this cool kind of thing.
There's another program that I can't remember the name of it, but that is mapping academic family trees, and one of the teaching professors here keeps showing it to students in his classes, and then many of them come and work in HGAPS, and they're like, "Oh, have you seen your academic family tree?" And they keep showing me the same picture, but it's not set up this way at all.
Okay, interesting.
That's it.
This is, yes. So this is another database. If they've got a decent
I spelled
API,
Sullivan wrong.
it might be possible.
There's Sullivan Pumpkins.
Okay. All right. Well, can I copy at least how that is spelled? It won't let me copy the text. Copy link address. Can it won't let me copy the freaking text. All right. Well, that's fine. Let's just look them up in Wikidata anyway. S-I-L Sylvan Tom. Let's see if they have a Wikidata item already existing. They do. American psychologist. Lovely. All right. And so it was your supervisor's supervisor, wasn't it? We'll click onto the Wikipedia page, not the QID. Wikidata item for Eric Youngstrom. Go back here. Supervisor was Carol, and it's Carol's supervisor?
Correct.
Yep. Carol's Doctoral Advisor.
The neurotree thing would have Brian's advisor too, and Brian worked with someone. Oh, it doesn't. He, I know, worked with somebody.
Yeah, it doesn't have any.
Somebody famous.
Oh, interesting. So it may be possible at some point, data licensed for reuse with attribution might still be possible to import all of this data into Wikidata.